This review is brought to you in part by Ryder's Hobby Shops, where the fun begins. Stop in to one of Ryder's 2 convenient Michigan locations where you'll find a full range of the latest hobby products, supplies, parts, tools, and paint. This review covers the fake-out Mustang funny car. It's a 132 scale kit from Atlantis, number 8275. Now the body of this kit is patterned after actual funny cars, and it's 36 pieces, come molded in blue, silver, black, and clear. Now the kit features tilt-up body, a detailed interior with, as Tom called them, baloney Hemi engines, and Goodyear's Bigs and Littles, with all new decals. Originally released in '72, the fake-out has seen several reboxings in the '70s, but the long drought is over and now it's back. Back in 1963, the Beach Boys sang the immortal lyrics, "'Cause if I had a set of wings, man, I know she could fly." And after 60 years, another visionary named Tom Daniel took those words to heart and added wings to a new breed of Fords, and his fake-out Mustang funny car took flight. My heartfelt thanks go out to Atlantis for saving these molds from oblivion, and they've reissued the fake-out funny car for us to enjoy once again. Now, the fake-out is just part of a 4-car snap kit of funny cars for beginners with a fresh new set of graphics and decals by Tom's son Kelly. And the series of 4 quick kits look better than ever. Now we'll show you how to add some flair to the kit by adding some engine wiring and aftermarket decal additions. And when you're done, the finished dimensions are about 6 3/4 inches long, 3.5 inches wide, and 1.5 inches high, or 3 inches when she's propped up. Here are the decals for the kit, and I must say they really got my attention with the red, white, and blue theme. I didn't use quite all of the decals that are on the sheet, but they go together very well onto the kit. They come off the backing paper very quickly, and they're just about the right thickness to be able to manipulate them. Just use plenty of warm water, and sometimes you'll need a little bit of setting solution to get them to conform to the body's contours. Here are the contents of the kit. As you can see, it's a very simple kit. It's simplified, but it has enough detail to give the impression of the features and parts that are in it. It's the perfect kit for a beginner as a step up from a simple snap kit with stickers. This has snap kit capabilities, but it also has decals. So even though it's a very simple kit, you can detail it. You can show a youngster how to detail it and use the decals as an on-ramp to better and bigger kits. Now, I also find that you can detail this kit, and you could actually make a contest model out of it. Now, I know you're laughing, but if you have a contest with box stock categories, you could enter this kit, and the things that I'm going to show you that are extra are usually considered legal and can be done. Things with like aftermarket decals and engine wiring are usually allowed. So this kit is not out of the running. It's craftsmanship that will win that category. As you'll see through most of the pieces, this kit was designed 50 years ago. And so the mold design and the intent wasn't the same back then. As you see, pin marks and flash, they're fairly easy to clean up. And even some mold wear has, happened to some of the parting line surfaces. We show you here some molding issues that were inherent with this kit. There were some, indents here that are caused, sinks as they're called, from the bosses on the other side. So you can clean them up or build the whole thing just as it is with a child and just let them put it together. But I wanted to enhance it, and so I put some putty on there, and then I smoothed it out with successive finer grits of sandpaper until there's just a film around it, and the sink itself is covered. Now, we'll be adding some
primer to that later, but as you see here, the red line indicates the parting line issue, and it goes right along the fender edges, the sills up there on the window, and right down this area right here is the worst of the flash, where the arrow points, and that just needs to be cleaned off with a hobby knife and some sanding papers, and right down the ridge there, right across the front of the bumper and down the spoiler. And once I had cleaned up the body satisfactorily, I decided to use a sanding primer. That's a dark gray primer, and then you can still see a slight impression there, and that will sand out from the surface after you do some sanding there. And then I've painted the model with some blue that was very close to the box art, because I think the color combinations of that and these great looking red, white, and blue decals are quite striking. So I left the color as it was intended, and I think it will work out just fine. As I've mentioned, here's that decal sheet. It's a great looking sheet, and I didn't use all of the decals. I did use some of the smaller Atlantis decals because, well, they could be a sponsor for a race car, I guess, so I put that right up front. And here the body is shown fully decaled, and they look just great. They go on pretty easy. You just have to use a little warm water and setting solution and put those into position. And the setting solution will help it, conform to the door panels, and in some cases, like the headlights later on, to something of a round nature. There are depictions in the instructions to show you where the decals are intended to go. I didn't follow all of those conventions. As you can see, I put the Mach 1 Mustang script here and the Wild Mustang up front on the air dam. I thought it was a pretty neat way to introduce the Mustang to the crowd as it's coming down the line. The one-piece frame is a real nice touch. It did have a little bit of warpage on the left side in the back with the wheelie bar there. I just put that under some warm water and bent it back into position. Now I used mostly aluminum for these parts that you see there, and flat black for the frame, and the wheelie bars, of course, were aluminum with black on the wheels. The seats were satin black, and the belts are green color with green snaps, or silver snaps, and there will be a little detailing on the contour, but on the console, but not too much. Also, I've added a little black wash there. You can see like the fuel cells, they've got a little black wash to highlight the raised areas. You can see here that some of the pieces have already been painted. The block is bare metal, the tranny is aluminum, and also the rear end cap, the end cover is aluminum. The pulleys were highlighted with a silver pen and flat black on the belts. As you see, the orange part there, that's the chute, parachute for slowing the thing down. And there's going to be just a little bit more coloration here. You see the headers are a white color. Oh, and that kind of strange thing in between the headers and the rear end pumpkin there, that'll be painted aluminum as well. Here you see something that was missing for a long time from model kits. There's sidewall script on the tires. Yes, they're made out of plastic, but in some cases that's not so bad. You can see it's a little bit soft, but it could be picked out. But I decided to use some aftermarket Goodyear markings to put on the sidewalls. Here you can see that I had put the wheels together, the big slicks in the back and the smaller ones, tires in the front. But there's a big mistake here. Oops! I should not have glued them together to try and eliminate the seams. And I did that so that I could scuff these out and make it pretty much invisible. But for the rear tires, that was a mistake. After the tires had dried, I decided, I sanded off the major script sidewall markings there so that the decals would lay flat on them. I painted the tires flat black, and then I sprayed them with a gloss coat. And then I applied the decals, as you see here. Unfortunately, as you'll notice, that when I went to put the wheels into the tires, they don't fit. The reason is because these are meant to be trapped inside the wheel, and that slot up at the top there where the arrow's pointing keeps those from slipping so that the tires will rotate with them. So my advice here is not to do that. And go ahead and install the wheels into the tires first the way the instructions show you, and then you can scuff the tires later and paint that section again by hand or mark off the face and spray it. But what to do? Well, I ground it off with a rotary tool, and it fit just fine inside. And once that happened, though, I had to glue the wheel into position so it wouldn't turn inadvertently. The front tires go together like conventional model kits, and you can just put those together as well with no issues. Now we can start to look at the details that go into the chassis and frame there. As you can see here, when you first get this, it's got some molded in seat belts. So I went and picked those out with some green pens, and then I went ahead and added a red patch for the mandatory patches on there, and also a little switch painting here for the console. There's only 2 switches on it, but the rest of the course is painted with aluminum for the entire box frame there for the seating area. I also removed the brace there at the back end, which is meant to protect the that fragile pieces at the back end of the frame. So now we can gather up the rear axle there, which was painted black, semi-gloss black, and the end cover, which was painted aluminum. Now I want you to note here the rear end on the axle. There's some highlighted silver highlights there on some rings there. Those are locators, and so as you see them here, the locators should go inside the frame, so the frame will snap onto that axle just on the outsides of those. And if you need to, you can sand a little bit off to make sure that you get that still to go in, but it snaps in well. Now note that the tires have been given a coat of flat dull coat, and then the wheels were installed into the tires, and both the front and rears were added onto the axles on the frame. The support for the body was painted aluminum, and that will get snapped onto the frame, but those tangs on the outsides will actually go inside the body to hold it in position. The spreader support there slides into a couple of notches on insides of the fuel cells, and you flip the chassis over to put that into place. Next, we can construct the engine. As I mentioned, the block is just raw metal. These are always aftermarket parts, and they didn't paint the engines for the racers. But sometimes, the funny cars were meant for show, and they were painted up. But this is a full-time racer, and it's going to get about 4 runs for the night, so it's going to add some road grime to it too. The blower body was snapped into place there, and now we're going to add the intake and the front cover, which also has an integrated brace, as well as the pulleys and fan belts. And as you can see, the pulleys are steel color, and so is the front cover. The intake there is aluminum with once again some black wash to highlight the raised portions. And once again, we're going to flip it upside down so that we can snap that brace into the front there, and the transmission into the rear end pumpkin. And so the arrow points to the slots in the and brackets that are in the side of the frame where those will go. They're indicated by the circles there. So you're going to just move this up and over and slide it into those spots that'll snap into place, as well as aligning it with the rear end so that it joins up with that. And so now your chassis is shaping up pretty nicely, and as you can see, it's all together here, and you essentially have a rolling chassis. And so here's what she'll look like right side up at this point. All of the metallic pieces, almost all of them, have had some black wash on them, a little track grime applied to them after a full day of racing, and it's looking pretty good, and she's coming together nicely. Next, we're going to work on the valve covers, and as you can see here, I'm using a pin vise and a small drill to drill out the holes in the valve covers for the spark plug wires. Then I'm going to add a little black Sharpie for those grommets up there that seal the spark plug wires on top. Because the headers are painted white, a flat white, I'm just going to use a sanding stick and sand off the ends so that it looks like the pipes are hollow. Now we can install the valve covers onto the frames that are attached to the headers and snap those into position on the engine next. Each set will slide in alongside of the blower there and through the middle of the frame. Once they're in position, put a little back pressure on the opposite side of the motor and then snap the headers and the valve covers into place. And here's an overhead view of your model as it sits right now. It's looking pretty good with the engine and the headers into position, the wheels on, and the frame all picked out. Now we can have a little fun and wire the Hemi engine with some beading wire that's found in the jewelry section of your craft store. I fashioned a magneto from some evergreen tubing and rod stock, and then I drilled a hole through the upper portion, the tubing, and then I threaded the wires through that for a makeshift magneto. I painted the magneto yellow and the stem aluminum. And I drilled a corresponding hole in the I'm going to call it the block, basically, above the upper right hand of the valve cover there to receive the magneto. I ran the right side wires behind the fan belts there and simultaneously inserted the magneto into that hole and glued that into position with some super glue. I routed the wires to the furthest spark plug hole there in the back first on each side, and then worked my way forward and kind of laid them into position the way that they would have been on a real engine. You can see them coming right straight down here from the valley off of the manifold. A little drop of super glue would secure them into position right there at the top of the spark plug hole opening. Here's a top view of our layout with the engine all wired up and ready to fire. Next, we'll add the steering column and the roll cage into place. The steering column was basically painted black as well, with some chrome spokes, and of course the roll cage was black. The contrast there against the silver tub. And the engine looks pretty nice too, with the white headers and the red-orange valve covers there. It's looking pretty nice for a very simple model. And as mentioned, the body prop rod was painted aluminum, and we're going to add that next, and that goes onto the frame. You can see in the circles there it attaches to the frame on some little holes that are there, little brackets, and it just lays down across the frame. The center bar keeps it from falling all the way down. And now we're going to add the rear brace to the back end of the body. This actually protrudes through the rear fenders. You'll see those silver spots that come out there. If you haven't done so already, you can paint the parachute I painted it to red-orange like the headers with some black straps and a silver buckle. You can see the body upside down here. The inside of most of the fiberglass bodies for funny cars were black or dark gray. Well, you can also see the spreader bar there, the rear brace that's used to hinge the unit. And we can pop that chute into place as you see here. Also note that the tail lights were detailed with some chrome paint, and when that was dry, some clear red. And I made another mistake that you're going to want to avoid. You see the arrow there is pointing to the point where you should clip those off. It looks like the sprue goes right up to the wing, but they don't. So don't make that mistake, because I had to use some tubing and drill into this thing and add some support bars so that I could install it into the body. And now we're going to gather these pieces. You see up in front of the car there, those little blobs that were on your decal sheet, those are your headlights. They go over the headlights that are molded in to make them look more real. Now the windows fit perfectly. Just snap those into position, and then of course we've got our wings to add to the body. And as you can see here, the headlights are looking more realistic than before. The opening there for the hood scoop can be enlarged so that it looks like a live scoop. And of course the wings then are simply inserted into the sides of the body so this baby can fly. And you can adjust those up and down and rotate them so that you get the perfect amount of lift. And now the detailing here was pretty easy. I used a chrome pen on the headlights before the decals were installed. I also used it to highlight the chrome trim around the grille and the bezels around the parking lights there, and those also were then after the that was dry, I used a little clear orange to indicate those parts. Well, it's time to put it all together, and you can see the body is staged there. It's all been finished, and the chassis is all ready, and it's looking pretty darn good. Now we're going to install the body onto the chassis, and it's not a real big deal, but there are some tricks that you can use to make sure it's stable and properly installed. I used a sanding stick there to sand a little bit off of the inside of the hooks that snap onto the spreader bar in the back, so to make sure that they didn't break, but still not too much so that they were loose. And then you can also, when you put the prop rod up, just make sure that it's in a stable position. And when you drop it down, be sure to make sure that you insert one of the forward supports on one side, and then spread the body a little bit, and then even it out so that it's nice and true and perpendicular and to the floor, etc. Well, there you have it. Your model is complete. And no, it's not a full kit, and no, it doesn't have a whole lot of extra detail, but if you do a little extra work, you can make this kit look pretty darn nice. And it also makes a really good first kit for the beginning modeler who's going to have to get used to using decals at some point. So it's an easy build. You actually don't have to do any of these enhancements, but you can, as you saw here. And a young person can simply snap it together because it's molded in color, and then just work with them to learn how to use the decals. And they're actually laid out pretty nicely. You see the sponsor bar there. It goes all in one piece all across the bottom. And here's a shot of the underside of your fake out. And once you've built one of these little kits, it doesn't take long. It's just like almost a one-day thing. You'll find that it's a real nice break. And you also see some Goodyear decals there near the back quarter, and I added those from extra. Those are not in the kit, but you can do that too, just like the tires, to bring out the personality of this model. And once you get it into position, I hope you'll buy one and put it on your shelf. Well, I hope you like this step-by-step premium model kit review, and so that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can do that by clicking on the icon on the lower right of any of our reviews, and you can find us on Facebook or our website, rightonreplicas.com. Thanks.